You guys sick of seeing me yet? Okay, so I don't know about you guys, but this is absolutely exciting for me, and it is my undeniable pleasure to introduce to you our Vice Presidential candidate, Spike Cohen.
Hey folks, thanks so much for coming. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Reno, Nevada. Nevada, I know.
Correct.
I know. Reno, Nevada. Thank you so much for coming out. Before I get started, first of all, I would like to thank you for having me face this way. Yesterday I was in Salt Lake City, where I was essentially, I guess, facing this way, where for the entire time I spoke, and there was nothing there to block it, the sun was just directly in my eyes. So I never actually got to see the crowd, and I think my vision has gone down a couple prescription levels since then. But I am very grateful that we have it here. Thank you all so much for coming out. Before I get started, I'd like to thank the Libertarian Party of Nevada. I do not know how to say it. The Libertarian Party of Nevada for putting this together. I'd like to thank Charlie and Sam and Sarah for speaking. I'd like to thank all of the volunteers here who have helped to put this together, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming out. Give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you very much. And folks, if anyone's seen any of my speeches here at these events before, I like to keep it pretty short and sweet, because I didn't come all this way just to say a bunch of stuff to you. I came here because I want to hear what you have to say. So after I do this speech, we're going to go into a Q&A. I'm going to take the first few questions of people that come up, and then I'll get to hang out with y'all for a bit, get some pictures and stuff like that, get to meet each and every one of you, hopefully. So folks, I'm going to keep it very simple. Jo Jorgensen and I are running for president and vice president because we have watched what happens when the Republicans and Democrats have had exclusive control of every lever of power in government for over 160 years. They have used that control to take your power and to take your freedom and to take your money. And the reason that's right, you can boo that. That's okay. That's a thing to boo. And the reason they did it was so that they could enrich themselves and the well-heeled, politically connected billionaire cronies who bought and paid for them to be in office. The reason that we support Jo Jorgensen, the reason that we vote Libertarian, is because we recognize that we live better lives when government is out of them, and when we have our power and our freedom and our money that we earn back in our hands where it always belonged. That is why we're voting for Jo Jorgensen. Folks, who here is sick and tired of seeing their loved ones and their family members and even themselves sign up to protect and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic, only to be sent overseas to fight and kill and possibly die for the benefit of military contractors and central bankers and foreign dictators, and if they're fortunate enough not to come home in a flag-draped casket, being subjected to the worst form of healthcare in this country, the VA? I know I am.
Amen.
Who here is sick and tired of watching the cost of living spiral out of control thanks to the Federal Reserve and its terrible monetary policies?
Yes.
And that's why we're going to end the Fed. I know how to do an applause line. And we're going to end the IRS too. I know how to get a crowd hype. Who here is sick and tired of watching entire industries flee, not just here in Nevada, but the entire U.S., and go overseas where their money is more welcome because of disastrous economic policies and regulations and taxes and mandates and other burdens from the Republicans and Democrats here? I know I am. Who here is sick and tired of watching entire communities being victimized and people being thrown in cages and having their lives ruined because of this disastrous war on drugs? Who here is sick and tired of being told by a militarized police state what weapons you should be allowed to own to protect yourselves and your families and your loved ones and your neighborhoods, while they buy any kind of weaponry they want and stick you with the bill for it? And that's why we're going to end the ATF. I know, everyone has their thing, right? Who here is sick and tired of being told whether or not you're essential, whether or not you should be allowed to go to work, whether or not you should be allowed to operate your business, whether or not you should be allowed to feed your families, whether or not you should be allowed to go to your houses of worship or visit your families or go to a park or go outside or go and do anything while you watch trillions of dollars being given to multi-billionaire corporations and you're stuck with the bill with interest.
Amen.
And folks, let's be clear. These policies weren't well-intentioned policies with unimaginable outcomes that who could have possibly known, because we've been telling everyone for decades that this would be the result of these policies. And they knew that. They knew what would happen when they implemented these policies, and they did it anyway because they want you to be desperate. They want you to be anxious. They want you not to know where your next paycheck is going to come from. They want you to be scared. They want you to be hopeless. Because if they can make you hopeless, it's that much easier for them to convince you that if you just give them the rest of your control and the rest of your money and the rest of your freedom, then you'll be safe. Then they can really take care of you. Then they can really make sure that everything's all right. Folks, we know that's a line of garbage. We know that the people who victimized us and put us in this position would never help us, that they created this problem precisely so that they can make things worse. That's why we're voting for Jo Jorgensen, because a vote for Jo Jorgensen is a vote to tell them that we're on to their game and it's over. Woo! Now, before I talk about my amazing running mate, allow me to talk about our opponents. Let's talk about Joe Biden. Oh, you've heard of him? Oh, okay. You heard of him. Joe Biden. Name a policy you hate. The war on drugs, the endless wars overseas, every tax that's imaginable, the so-called crime bill, the war on guns, Obamacare. Every single one of these laws that we all hate, Joe Biden has either sponsored or co-written, or in some cases written himself, or helped pass into law, or oversaw the enforcement of while he was in the White House for 8 years. Joe Biden is one of the architects of every bad thing to come out of Washington for nearly 50 years, when he's not busy sniffing children or trying to make women kiss him in front of camera. And how fitting that that the architect of the militarized police state would choose as his running mate one of its most brutal enforcers. Let's talk for a moment about Kamala Harris. Wow, you guys have heard of everyone. Kamala Harris, who has the distinction of locking away more people at the state level than any other person alive. Kamala Harris, who at least twice intentionally withheld exonerating evidence in a capital murder case. Let me say that again. She was trying to execute people that she had evidence that demonstrated they didn't do the thing that she was trying to have them executed for. And not only did she not stop trying to prosecute them, she withheld the evidence because she didn't want to hurt her conviction record. This is who the Democrats have asked you to throw your vote away for. Now let's talk about Donald Trump. Oh, you've heard of him too? Let's talk about the lifelong crony who has used government to enrich himself at the expense of others, whether we're talking about using eminent domain to steal land using government from widows who didn't want to sell their properties to him to build his next casino, and then when those casinos failed, using the bankruptcy courts to make sure that he got as much of the profits as possible and his poor investors got unloaded with as much of the debt as possible. Donald Trump, who said that he would drain the swamp only to become the king of the swamp creatures. He said, what did he say? He said that he would reduce the cost, he would reduce government spending, and instead he has spent almost as much money as any president before him in just 3.5 years. He said that he would cut the debt. He actually said he would eliminate the national debt, and instead he has run up more debt in 3.5 years than any president before him, including Barack Obama, in what it took Obama 8 years to do. He has run up more debt just this year than almost any other president before him. He said that he would protect our right to keep and bear arms, and instead he has passed more gun control regulation and executive orders than the last 4 presidents before him. This is who he is. Every single promise that he has made to shrink government or to make it smaller or more deregulated, he has done the opposite. And now let's talk about who he's chosen as his running mate. Let me talk as much about Mike Pence as he has demonstrated relevance during this administration. I'm sorry, I forgot what I was talking about. I apologize. That never happens. I'm so sorry. That is who the Republicans have asked us to throw our vote away for. Now let's talk about who we're asking you not to throw your vote away for and to actually vote for something. Let's talk about Dr. Jo Jorgensen. Jo Jorgensen, a brilliant self-made entrepreneur. Someone who, and I don't know why this is even a bar we have to cross, someone who we don't have to worry whether or not she'll pass a cognitive test. Because apparently that matters now. Jo Jorgensen, someone who is ready to lead from day one. Not by taking power from you, not by trying to control and micromanage your life, but by giving you the power back, by giving you your freedom and your money back. Because as smart as Jo is, she's smart enough to know, libertarians are smart enough to know that we'll never be able to run your life as well as you can, as well as you're able to when you're given your power and your money and your freedom back, and when the barriers that have been put in place to make your life harder for no good reason are removed. That's why we're libertarians. That's why we're voting for Jo Jorgensen. Folks, Jo and I are fighting. The Libertarian Party is fighting to build a grassroots army for human liberty, fighting for a world set free in our time, and we need your help. If you haven't already, I ask you to join the Libertarian Party. I ask you to go to lp.org and sign up today to join the party, if you haven't already. And when you're done doing that, I ask you to go to one of these fine folks who's helping to volunteer, one of these folks with a volunteer shirt on, and ask them how you can join your state and your local affiliates. I ask you to help and join the party, because this party and people like Sam and Charlie and Sarah and everyone else who's been involved in this, everyone who is fighting every day for human liberty, to build things at the grassroots level, they need your help. That is where the fight is happening. And once you've done that, I ask you to go to our campaign website, jo20.com. That's jo20.com. And I ask you to go there and fill out our volunteer form. We'd love to have you join our team. And if you're able to, I ask you to make the contribution. Because folks, the Republicans and Democrats, they ask for your money too, but they actually don't have to. Because not only do they get automatic ballot access, they get to rob you to pay for their campaigns. Mm-hmm. You may or may not know this, but the Republicans get something called federal matching funds, which is a nice way of saying that they rob you in income taxes and use it to help fund their campaigns. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And they do this for a very simple reason. It's for the same reason that they tell you that if you don't vote for them, you're throwing your vote away. You're wasting your vote. It's because they don't just believe they're entitled to your vote and your support. They believe that they're entitled to your money. They believe that they're entitled to every single aspect of your life, including funding their campaigns. Folks, libertarians have never taken a penny of federal matching funds, and we never will, because we don't believe we're entitled to your money or your vote or your support. We believe that we have to earn it. Yeah. Woo! And if I've earned your support today, I ask for your vote, and I ask for any contribution that you're able to make. It allows us to do these kinds of bus tours. It allows us to go around the country at a time when our opponents are hiding in bunkers and basements, refusing to speak in front of the American people who are out in the streets outraged at the results of their disastrous policies. We're out here talking with folks every single day, and we need the monetary contributions to be able to travel around the country and do that. We need it to be able to do viral social media marketing. We need it to be able to do ad placement on TV and streaming services. We need it to be able to get the message out there, because we know the Republicrats and their system aren't going to help us, and we sure as hell know that the crony corporate media isn't going to help us. And we know why they aren't going to help us, because they're owned by 6 multi-trillion-dollar multinational corporations who have a vested interest in keeping this crony gravy train status quo going. They know that when Jo Jorgensen is in the White House and libertarians are in positions of power up and down the ballot all across this country in every single state plus DC, that their gravy train is over and that they're going to have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and live within their means like they tell us to do every day. So we greatly appreciate any support you could give. Myself, Charlie, Sam, everyone running across up and down the ballot in the Libertarian Party. So folks, we're going to start the Q&A now. First few people to come up, I'd be happy to answer your questions, and then I'll be going about I'll be roaming about the park here and talking with folks and taking pictures and everything. But I want to end on this. As I said before, Jo Jorgensen and I are fighting for a world set free in our time. The Libertarian Party, all of you here that are helping, are fighting for a world set free in our time. And our time is now. Thank you. So, if anyone would like to come up to Sarah and ask your question, we would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Hi, Spike.
Hey, how are you?
I have a one-word question for you.
Oh, no.
A one-word answer from you.
Oh, gosh.
What exactly is taxation?
Extortion. The crowd-pleasing favorite is theft, of course, which from a moral standpoint it is, but theft is actually a legal term. The most accurate term is extortion, because theft could just be me running by and taking your money and running away, and now you're chasing me down the street. Extortion is when I walk up with a gun to your head and say, give me your money or I'm going to ruin your life. That's what taxation is. Hey, how are you doing?
Thank you for your remarks. Now, you may not recognize me behind this attire, but I actually moderated a virtual debate with you on March 15th. I'm the chairman of the U.S. Communist Party.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you your position on the progress of technology and how various elements of the U.S. government may be standing in the way, especially the Food and Drug Administration, with regard to its extensive process for the approval of drugs and therapies, and especially these days vaccines. And what would you propose as the solution to these barriers if hypothetically you were elected as vice president?
I remember you. You had a Russian last name, I believe. Yes. Okay, I remember you. You weren't wearing all that, but I do remember you, and I appreciate that was a great time we had. That was a few months ago now. That's an excellent question. Not just the FDA when it comes to drugs, the DEA. We're seeing so much progress in things like cannabis and psilocybin. I always can't remember if it's psilocybin or psilocybin, but mushrooms and other psychedelics and other drugs that are either scheduled to be heavily regulated or scheduled to not be used at all. We're seeing in other countries how they're seeing great results in things like dealing with depression and pain management and all sorts of other things. So the FDA and the DEA are getting in the way with arbitrary regulations that were in some cases put in place for moral and religious reasons, or just to control the market and protect big pharma from new innovative competitors. This stuff all has to go. And we're seeing it in other sectors too. We're seeing how our energy sector is being held back by energy regulations that do nothing to protect the environment. They just stop innovators from being able to create the next thing that's going to provide us with energy that's that much cheaper, that much cleaner, that much more renewable, that much more accessible. We get government out of the way. Even if we believe, even if we recognize that there is a role for government that is to protect the lives and rights and property of the people under its presumed jurisdiction. At no point should government be saying, yes, if you want to innovate in the market, we're going to make it really hard, and you're going to have to spend all this money that you may or may not have, and that way you just can't operate and our cronies will keep funding our re-election campaigns. That does nothing to help anyone. All that has to go away. And thankfully, a lot of it can happen at the executive level, because those regulatory agencies, their regulations can be undone at the executive level, and the executive orders that contributed to them can be undone at the executive level. When Jo is in office, she'll be able to undo a lot of that before we even need to negotiate with Congress. Thank you for your question. I appreciate it. Hey, how are you doing?
So, my question is, we're living in a time of civil unrest, right? There's a lot of police intervention, people are having, I guess my question is to you, it's kind of hard to have it all back there. So, my question is that the basis of libertarianism is individual liberty and not affecting anybody else. Right. Yet we have these crowds that are running around, in these cities that are burning down people's homes and their businesses that they've worked their lifetimes for. You've shown support for BLM, and there's Antifa out there that these guys. I understand the basis behind it, because there is injustice in militarization of the police.
But don't burn someone's house down.
Don't burn somebody's house. So how do you plan on dealing with that?
Absolutely. So that's an excellent, and I didn't catch your name. Mike, thank you. That's an excellent question. Now, let's be clear before we get into the weeds and start going through this. The Libertarian Party, Jo Jorgensen and myself, completely disavow anyone who is using any reason to harm people, destroy private property, destroy homes, loot, pillage, steal, any reason, any pretext, any legal justification, hint, that anyone might have to take from people or to harm them. We are completely against that, whether it's coming from the private or public sector. We are completely against it. It is aggression, it is wrong, it accomplishes nothing, it should stop. So I just want to be clear on that right off the bat. We are dealing with something that's happening here as a result of the root cause of the protest. And I'm talking just about the protest, not the riots. The root cause of the protests is an increasingly militarized and an increasingly unaccountable police state. And it has reached a fever pitch where now people are out in the streets, even in the midst of a pandemic, saying, we are sick of this. We want it to end. And if you look at the policies that most of that movement is going around, that they can almost all of them agree on, they almost entirely line up with libertarianism, ending the war on drugs, ending qualified immunity, ending civil asset forfeiture, ending no-knock rates, ending mandatory minimum sentencing, stuff we've been proposing. I'm glad that they've come to the show and to join us, because this is stuff we've been proposing for decades. As soon as some of these policies came out, we were already there to say, these are bad, end them now. So we agree with them on those things. We have seen what happens, and this is also because of the war on guns, and I'll explain why. Unarmed protesters are showing up and experiencing what happens when you show up to a gunfight unarmed. You're getting tear gassed, you're getting pepper sprayed, you're getting locked up. There are protesters who have been in jail without cause or any total violation of their habeas corpus rights for sometimes weeks. We are seeing people who are protesting police brutality being brutalized by police. Now, interestingly enough, the ones who have showed up armed and the protests where Boot Boys and Black Panthers and NFAC have showed up, all of a sudden they're not getting tear gassed. They're not getting pepper sprayed. They're not getting any of that. In fact, I was at a Black Lives Matter rally where I was one of the few people there that didn't have a gun, and the police were 5 blocks away. They didn't even come near us. They didn't even want to unintentionally start anything, because it turns out you don't bring tear gas to a gunfight. Now, going back to the source of the riots, when people who show up angrily but peacefully protesting and are now being brutalized, that can make things violent. Also, the police are often, not always, but in many cases, they are concentrating all of their personnel into the area of the protest and leaving the entire rest of the city unpoliced. And thanks to the war on guns, yet again, they've left the people there unable to defend themselves against the opportunists who show up, who often don't give a crap about Black Lives Matter or anti-fascism or fighting police brutality or anything else. They see an opportunity to steal. They see an opportunity to burn. They see an opportunity to loot and pillage and to harm people. And those folks aren't able to defend themselves. So the answer here is multifold. Number one, we end the root cause by ending the policies that are leading to police brutality, and so that bad actors are held accountable, good police are encouraged and rewarded, and we can begin to heal that rift between the police and the public they serve. The next thing that we do is we end the war on guns, so that not only do the protesters feel empowered to not worry about being brutalized, but so do the business owners and the homeowners and everyone else who are watching their communities being burned down. The purpose of the Second Amendment is multifold. Yes, it's against fighting tyranny. Yes, it's against protecting yourselves against anyone who would try to harm you. Yes, it's because they're awesome and fun to shoot. There are many reasons to do it. In this case, it's twofold. Protection against tyranny, deterrence against tyranny, and protection and deterrence against looting and pillaging. So the answer again, as always, is get government out of it. Thank you.
On this pamphlet, it says reduce the cost of education. Is that like college, or what exactly is that like?
It's actually both, but yeah. So as it relates to higher education, for whatever reason, the federal government, well, it's not for whatever reason, to the benefit of universities that wanted to make more money, the federal government got involved in higher education. Now here's what happened before the federal government was involved. If a college was charging this amount of tuition, they knew that that was enough, that the students could afford it, and they would get their seats filled up with students. If they charged this much, they'd lose a couple students. If they charged this much, they'd lose even more students. So they had to keep what we call a price equilibrium. They had to charge just enough where they were making money, but people could still afford it. That wasn't working for them. They wanted to build massive stadiums. They wanted to have massive multi-tens of billions of dollar trust funds that they were sitting on. So the federal government came to save the day for them. And the government said, oh my gosh, we need to protect students. And the way we're going to protect those students is we're going to set some minimums here that you can't charge, maximums here that you can't charge any more than. And they made those maximums way higher than they were already charging. And the schools went, okay, you twisted my arm. We won't charge you a penny more than the amount that you're telling us to charge now. Then what the government said is, well, good, since you're promising not to charge any more than we just said you can't charge, we'll back all of those. We'll back all of those loans, and we'll back all of those grants and everything, so that you get the money that you wanted. That led to massive increases that are still growing to this day, because every year they raise that minimum or that maximum, and it led to tuitions that students couldn't afford. But they have to afford it because A, it is being backed by lenders and it is being backed by grants, and B, because there are a bunch of ridiculous occupational licensing laws that are in place that require them to get that schooling in the first place. Because they shouldn't, thank you for that. Because they shouldn't have had to do that in the first place. They could have just done an internship with people who know how to do that, learn how to master it, now they can do it professionally. But it turns out that doesn't make money for colleges and universities, so you can't have that. So, here's what happens next. The student lenders start going, we're not going to make our money back. These students are 40% of the students are dropping out. They're going bankrupt, and now they're not paying us back. We're losing money. So then the federal government goes, oh, okay, we'll just take it over. So now you're being lent your money by the federal government. And now, even if you drop out, even if you go bankrupt, you still owe that money, and you still have to go to college if you want to do any of those things. So here's what we do. We, like it said on there, get government out of it. Get rid of those absurd maximums and tell them, now you have to charge what the students can afford, because we're also not backing the loans anymore. Now you have to actually go to the students, and if they can't afford it, you better lower it. And I got news for you, they can't afford it. They've been saying that for decades now. So you're gonna have to lower it if you want any students here. Oh, and by the way, we're gonna get rid of a lot of that ridiculous occupational licensing so that you don't have to go to school to braid hair or do makeup or do aesthetic work or any of the other ridiculous things that they're saying you need to go to school to learn how to do, when you could just do an apprenticeship and actually learn it better from the people who are actually doing it. When it comes to K through 12 education, it's the same thing. Federal government got involved. Literacy rates have continued to drop. Student-to-teacher ratios have continued to go through the roof. They've spent $2 trillion. An increasing number of children are being labeled special needs so that they can get around the federal standardized testing. The entire thing is a joke. I have talked to so many teachers who who have said they're making it harder. In fact, I've yet to meet a teacher who hasn't said that the federal government is making it harder for them to do their job and teach children, especially special needs educators. It is an unmitigated disaster. We get government out of it, we take that power